Alright, finally I can take this stupid sheet off. It's starting to smell like rubber and static electricity under here. Anyways, back to business as usual. So now that we've wrapped up the scariest part of my job, until someone starts sending me cease and desist and taking my videos down for random algorithmic reasons, we've got a few TV shows on the chopping block I've been meaning to get to. And luckily for us, a lot of them ended last month, meaning I can partake in my newly minted tradition to binge the entire thing in just a single weekend, only to then blurt out my opinion of it at the next available opportunity. And to kick things off, we've got Peacemaker. That's right, the continuing adventures of James Gunn, fruitlessly trying to capture a man on camera who cannot be seen by the human eye. It's the long-awaited second season to the hit spin-off of his Suicide Squad, making the big jump from the DCEU to the more streamlined DCU. And today, we're gonna figure out how the whole thing panned out. So was this season a success? How well does it compare to what came prior? And how does it stack up against the rest of his filmography? And most importantly, after seeing it, am I still excited for the direction that the DCU is heading? Or are we starting to see some of the cracks in the armor showing? Well, luckily for us, I managed to secure this snazzy new helmet that grants me the ability to investigate further. So, let's discuss. Oh, how much I missed the red. So Peacemaker, as you all know, is an HBO Max show, or a Max show, or I don't know, they'll call it whatever when all these companies merge into one corporate entity that controls our brains. Written and directed by James Gunn, starring in addition to, all of his friends, the one and only John Cena, as Christopher Smith, also known as Peacemaker. And the story is about this dude who, after his little brush with death during the Project Starfish mission,
Starfish is a slang term for a butthole.
returns to his hometown of Evergreen, where he teams back up again with much of the crew from Argus, and continues serving his government while learning a little bit more about himself and the ways in which he feels he needs to change to be a better man, while also continuously being screwed by his government. Funny how those two things kind of end up going hand in hand. Also be warned, we're about to get into some spoilers for both Peacemaker Seasons 1 and 2, The Suicide Squad, and for safe measure, Superman, so spoilers. Starting with some context, the first season of the show was something of lightning in a bottle. Because in all honesty, the idea of making a spin-off to a character from the Suicide Squad who was actually just written to die seemed like just a last-minute addition, done in the name of riding the coattails of the continually rising stardom of John Cena. But yeah, it definitely seemed like a strange decision at the time to center an entire series around not even a D-list character, but like a Z-lister. Because listen, I like comic books probably much more than the next guy, unless the next guy, also runs a comic book themed YouTube channel. And if they're smart, they'd remind the people watching to like, comment, and subscribe. That always helps out. But yeah, when I first heard the casting announcement for that Suicide Squad movie, even I didn't know who Peacemaker was. Hell, when I saw the first trailers, my first thought was, what's Orion from the New Gods doing here? See, cause, the helmet. But if there's two things that James Gunn is good at, it's finding wrestling stars of amazing acting chops, and spotlighting lesser known characters, getting audiences to,
give a
And by combining these two strengths, he managed to pull off what I consider to be one of the greatest superhero shows we've ever received. Peacemaker Season 1 was bold, innovative, fun, exciting, and a whole bunch of other buzzwords. But most important of them all, unexpected. From honing in on the lesser explored elements and characters of this universe,
apple dumpling gang.
to the gripping mystery it provided, the twists and turns of who is and is not one of the main antagonists, and how it not only managed to get us to care about Peacemaker, the jerk who killed the surprisingly likable Rick Flag,
Peacemaker, what a joke.
but also this brilliant cast of characters including John Economos, Vigilante, Harcourt, Merv, and most importantly, Leota Adebayo, who was the standout of Season 1. Played by Danielle Brooks, she manages to perfectly balance out the more hokey and wacky elements of Peacemaker with a down-to-earth human perspective, as well as an appreciation for just how ridiculous of the situations these characters will find themselves in. Her radiant optimism and endless ability to see the good in everyone makes her just a joy to watch, and Brooks' performance really brings the whole thing home. To make a long story short, Season 1 of Peacemaker left a really high bar that the second season was going to have to clear. So now let's see if it managed to do that. Starting with the good, all the characters who survived the first season managed to make their way on over to the second. So sorry, Merv, I guess you're gonna have to be reincarnated as a high evolutionary over in the Marvel universe. I'm sure that's gonna work with that. Oh, Jesus Christ! And much like the first season, all of the characters managed to continue to entertain with amazing performances all around. The chemistry between the cast and the crew is evident from every scene these characters share. And I love seeing them get the opportunity to grow. Mainly the star of the show, Peacemaker, whose arc for this season is learning to come to terms with the man he ended up growing up to be, for both the good and the bad that comes with it. starting at a place where he genuinely wants to move forward, but is consistently hampered down by his feelings of inadequacy and remaining guilt from all the pain he's caused the people in his life. He's also still seriously messed up from having to kill his dad in the first season, who, despite being, a racist fuck, played brilliantly by Robert Patrick, who, as far as I know, is none of those things, still at the end of the day was his father, and having to put a bullet between his eyes, well, that's not exactly a recipe for a well-adjusted adult now, is it? And the story itself really lends itself to this. Getting to further explore that pocket universe that is kept in his dad's old closet, Chris is given the opportunity to go to a brand new world where it seems that everything is exactly as he'd hoped it would be. His brother's alive, his dad's alive, and the three of them together are the world's greatest superheroes called the Top Trio. And as an added bonus, because in this universe he never ended up killing Rick Flag, there just might be a chance for him and the hardcore of this world to pursue the relationship that they failed to cultivate in the Prime Earth. And after a run-in with his alternate reality self, resulting in a less than agreeable first encounter, Chris is given the opportunity to take on the role of his doppelganger and enjoy this perceived better world for himself. Funny that just a week ago I was talking about the movie Coraline. And much like that beloved tale, this story also unfolds in a similar manner, where things get so bad for Chris in his home dimension, what with Rick Flag Sr., the father of the man he killed, gunning for his revenge at every opportunity, as well as his deteriorating relationship with Harcourt, which as we learn is a result of her having a fling with Rick Flag Jr., meaning that she has a whole manner of complicated feelings about the situation. And then there's this mysterious encounter that these two had on a boat that they refuse to talk about throughout the entire season. All this results in Peacemaker deciding to leave this world behind and seeking a better one in the other world. It's up to his friends of the 11th Street Gang to retrieve their old buddy from what we eventually learn is a Nazi planet. That's right, Chris's paradise world turns out to be, of all places, Earth X, where the events of World War II went a little differently. All this to say, it's a really fun story and offers a great opportunity to get to further understand the character of Chris Smith, as well as doing a lot to further expand the DC universe. Which is another thing I liked, which is getting to see more of this new reality, picking up shortly after the events of the Superman movie that came out earlier this year, being the reason why Peacemaker ends up having an encounter with the law. Because if you remember from that Superman movie, the government is now on high alert for anything that might cause a dimensional rift, like what tore the city of Metropolis in half. And I really just love how well all of this folds in with the greater expanding DC universe. With as many cast and characters returning as they can muster, from Luthor's crew to, hell, even the man himself in a single scene, as well as the getting to dive into more of Rick Flag Sr., creates this continuity for this character that can be tracked from project to project. And the little Easter eggs and references to the movie go a long way to helping sell this as a continuation of the story. From things like the black hole animation being reused in the scene, to different perspectives of that monster fight that occurred in the second act, and even getting to see the Justice Gang during the interview process in the first episode, where Peacemaker fails to make a good impression with what he perceives are some of the top heroes in this world. The connective tissue is not intrusive, but rather additive. Like, if you didn't see the movie before, you still could follow along well enough, just assuming that these are more weird things going on in this wacky world that you'll just accept and allow to go unexplained. And if you really do want those answers, well, in some projects, you'll find them. Maybe not for things like, the Prime Eagle and whatever was going on with Eagly there, but it's called world building. I also just think it's great how they chose to fold this whole story into the new DCU proper. Considering the fact that the first season of Peacemaker took place in the universe prior, I was curious to see how they'd make the leap, and they did it through this clever previously on Peacemaker segment in the first episode, where they show a few key scenes that illustrate the differences, and pretty much tell us that everything in the first season is canon, aside from that Justice League cameo at the end, and a line here and there.
You know he tells people I'm a puke freak?
It's as clean of a fix as you can hope for, while also managing to preserve the elements of that show that worked, which was pretty much the entirety of it. Now the real question is how much of that Suicide Squad film is even canon. But yeah, a few other points of praise I want to lobby at this project is that the action, while a little few and far between, is only as exciting, thrilling to watch, and well framed. The writing is humorous and always clever, more often than not making me laugh, but more importantly, never done in a way that makes me feel like it takes away from the drama of the moment. Furthermore, the effects in this season are tremendous, and nothing ever stood out to me as seeming fake. And finally, I gotta give praise to the music, though this time around there are a few criticisms I'm gonna give, though I've got nothing but praise to say about that opening dance number. And I really just love how big of a swing this creator takes. This show never pulls any punches. There are no moments when I feel that the creator's hands are tied, and everything I think that he wanted to put on screen is there. But that is where we're gonna get into some of the issues. Because unlike the first season, season 2 does have a few fumbles, as well as issues cropping up that I fear will become bigger problems later down the line with this specific creative team in particular. My first biggest problem is actually as a follow-up to the first season, in that I don't really feel like it's the best in terms of a continuation. What do I mean by this? Well, the first season did a very good job at setting up all these different problems and issues that the characters would be left with once the credits rolled. Such as Peacemaker struggling to accept how things ended up going down with his father, nothing about what happened to the butterflies that managed to get away, no follow-up at all on what happened to Amanda Waller after the events of Season 1, and very little insight provided on the main characters outside of Leota and Chris. Leota's story of her marriage falling apart with her and her wife is probably the second most emotionally resonant portion of the story, culminating in a very mature and impactful scene where the two agree that while they still love each other, their goals and wants of the future no longer align, and that in order to pursue their dreams, they have to go their separate ways. But unfortunately, the other characters in the gang just don't get the same level of treatment. From Vigilante to Economos to even Harcourt to some extent, none of them really get to feel like they grow or change much throughout the course of this season, in the same way that Leota and Chris managed to. It mostly just feels like the remaining characters are all jogging in place, and in order to distract from this, it seems that Gunn will either give them an exciting action scene or the best one-liners. It worked well enough with Economos, considering that Steve Agee's just really good at delivering this sort of stuff, but from time to time it did get a bit grating with Vigilante, especially with those stupid animal facts that just never landed with me. We also gotta talk about the villain of this season, and the kind of scattershot approach they took. You'd think that with a setup like this, the main villains would end up being the folks over in the Nazi planet, but those folks are more or less just a bunch of obstacles that our main characters need to escape from. And the real main villain of the season ends up being Rick Flag Sr., who I just never found to be all that intimidating. Namely just down to the fact that his heel turn felt rather abrupt. His arc from being a well-respected hero in Creature Commandos, to kind of a dick in the Superman movie, to the main antagonist of Peacemaker, never felt all that fluid, and it results in me just being generally less interested in the character, and less afraid of what he's gonna do next. And that's another problem with the season, is that a lot of the elements that it presents are just kind of undercooked. Very little development is given to Earth X, we never learn how it's set up, the major differentiations between our world and theirs, which is probably just James Gunn trying to say something about our world, and yeah, I agree. But I wish we could have seen more about the things he was alluding to, like, the camps, the quote-unquote heroes of this world, or just some kind of resolution with Peacemaker's alternate universe brother, and that world's Rick Flag. I'm glad that they used the multiverse to explore a specific character, but I do think it's also important that you do your part to flesh out the world that they're undergoing this exploration. The season also just ended up feeling a lot more meandering than the first, which I mean with a cast of characters like this, I can honestly just listen to them read a phone book or do a podcast, but I'd like to see a little bit more going on, especially when we're dealing with something as big as
the multiverse,
and government agencies hunting down our protagonists. Like, where's the subterfuge, the deception, the betrayal? Characters like John Economos are in the belly of the beast. You never feel all that worried about his safety because none of the people he's surrounded by are all that frightening to begin with. They never back him into a corner and put him into a tight bind, and just pretty much let him off scot-free at every turn. There's really a lack of tension and characters being at odds with one another, or ever feeling like they're really in danger. With the only notable exception being the straw that broke the camel's back, in that Peacemaker thinking that Harcourt betrayed him, resulting in him going to the other dimension. But this is quickly resolved, and never really plays out that much of an impact after they straighten things out. And sometimes I just don't feel like we dedicate the time that we have to the right sort of scenes. What with the excessive needle drops and music video-esque sequences, I get that this is stuff that James Gunn is interested in, but I do think it results in him losing the focus of the story from time to time. I think it would have been better if we had characters reflecting more on their decisions and how they impacted one another in a similar manner to how Leota and her ex-wife dealt with their personal relationship. I mean, for crying out loud, Vigilante killed Peacemaker's father in the other universe, and they have nothing to say about it. Especially after we learn the fact that that version of his dad wasn't a monster. It's really those interpersonal dynamics that I feel like that we're missing this go around, in the fact that everyone's just kind of on good terms. Even Harcourt and Chris, despite not being in agreement on how they want to pursue their relationship, don't really undergo much of a change from how they left things in season 1. And the final point of criticism I'm going to give is that ending, in that the show did not do anything to make me care about the Salvation plotline, which is already one I have no idea what it's about. But to further drive the point home of leaving Chris on that planet as the final shot, I mean, that's just weird to me. Because I think it would have been much stronger to wrap things up a few scenes earlier with the formation of Checkmate. That to me felt like the best place to end things. And if you really want to do this cliffhanger ending, well, then why is this also the last episode of Peacemaker proper? Because all reports say that there isn't going to be a season 3 of the show. And I know we're probably going to pick back up with these characters in another series, maybe a Checkmate show or whatever Project Gunn has in mind. but it's just not going to be the same thing. It's like that problem I had with The Mandalorian, where they had this emotional ending in Season 2 with Grogu being given up by the Mando, only for them to go and wrap all the plot lines up in another show, that being the Book of Boba Fett. It's just really confusing to partition your story like this, and will result in less people seeing these storylines conclude. You can leave some elements unresolved or even open to interpretation, but to have the main character of the series be stranded on another world, it's just going to make for a weird storyline that another series is going to have to pick up later on down the line. It's not a deal breaker, but it's also just not the most ideal. But as we draw things to a close, overall, I had a really good time with Peacemaker Season 2. Yeah, in my opinion, it was a step down in comparison to Season 1, but taken on its own, it's a really well-constructed piece of comic book storytelling that pushes the universe that it takes place in so many potentially new directions. The characters for the most part remain well realized and enjoyable to follow, and I just love the general freedom that James Gunn feels like he has with his narrative. Gunn is also unafraid to inject deeper themes into his stories. There's the obvious messages, things like family are the people in this world who lift you up and not the ones who tear you down, or be grateful for the life you have and not the one you wish you were given, or obvious things like are bad and should be dealt with accordingly. Overall good stuff that he manages to tie in with the story being told. Sure, this go around it wasn't exactly as well plotted as before, and there are a few cracks in the armor I'm starting to notice, and I'm going to keep an eye out for down the line. Namely things like everyone being a complete joke machine and chatterbox, and the heavy reliance on the soundtrack for emotional beats. But I am happy with how this season ended up turning out, and though it does seem like it is officially concluded, I look forward to seeing how other tales pick up with these characters and all the more stories that this universe will get to tell. Because at the end of the day, I still have faith in this creative team, and so long as the studios keep their together, then I got high hopes for where these stories will end up going. Or that could happen! Hey, thanks for watching, and if you stuck all the way to the end, why don't you check out another one of our videos on screen now. And if you want to chat directly, come join our Discord, link in the description below.